What makes a farewell unforgettable? Is it the timeless traditions, the raw emotion, or the quiet gestures that echo louder than words? Queen Elizabeth II's funeral was more than a ceremony. It was history in motion. From Big Ben's solemn tolls to the Queen's corgis bidding farewell, every detail carried profound meaning. What was the significance of the royal symbols removed during the ceremony? How did Prince George and Princess Charlotte embody the monarchy's future? And how did the Queen's piper deliver her final, poignant goodbye? These moments define a farewell the world will never forget. On a chilly morning in mid-September, an extraordinary scene unfolded in the heart of London. Thousands of mourners from every corner of the world gathered, forming a queue that stretched for miles. Some had traveled great distances. Others had waited hours, even days, for a fleeting moment to pay their respects. The occasion was unlike any the modern world had witnessed, the lying in state of Queen Elizabeth II. The somber procession into Westminster Hall was marked by a hush that blanketed the gathered crowd. Inside the historic venue, the Queen's coffin rested atop a raised platform, draped in the royal standard and adorned with the imperial state crown, the orb, and the scepter, symbols of her reign. Guards stood vigil in silent reverence, their stoic presence underscoring the gravity of the moment. For 5 days, the hall remained open to the public, allowing mourners to file past. Some wept openly, their grief echoing through the vast stone chamber. Others bowed their heads, their gestures a quiet acknowledgement of a monarch who had been a steadfast presence for over 7 decades. Among the visitors were world leaders, dignitaries, and everyday citizens, their collective presence reflecting the Queen's far-reaching impact. Outside, the atmosphere was equally poignant. Along the south bank of the Thames, where the queue stretched endlessly, strangers bonded over shared memories of the Queen. They spoke of her unwavering dedication, her calm presence during crises, and the way she seemed to embody the very spirit of Britain. Children clutched small flags, their parents recounting stories of a monarch whose reign began long before their own lives. As each day passed, the anticipation for the state funeral grew. The media captured every detail, from the carefully orchestrated logistics to the personal touches woven into the ceremonies. Floral tributes piled high near Buckingham Palace, each bouquet a small but heartfelt offering. Letters and cards left by mourners spoke volumes, their words a tapestry of love, gratitude, and loss. On the final evening of the lying in state, a marked shift occurred. As the clock struck midnight, Big Ben's somber toll began to fill the air. For 96 minutes, the iconic bell rang once for every year of the Queen's life, a rhythmic tribute that reverberated through the city and beyond. Those who had gathered along the streets listened in silence, the weight of history pressing upon them. It was a reminder of her enduring presence and the inevitable reality of her absence. In the early hours of September 19, 2022, the Queen's time lying in state officially came to an end. The doors of Westminster Hall were closed for the last time, and preparations for the funeral were underway. Workers moved swiftly and with precision, mindful of the world's gaze fixed on the unfolding events. The significance of the day wasn't lost on anyone involved. They were part of a moment that would be remembered for generations. As dawn broke, a gray sky greeted the city. Crowds had already begun to gather, positioning themselves along the route the funeral procession would take. Some held banners or photographs of the Queen, their faces a mixture of solemnity and pride. Others clutched umbrellas, braving the chill to ensure they wouldn't miss a second of history. The funeral procession began in the early morning, and all eyes turned to the Royal Navy State funeral gun carriage. This iconic symbol of British royal funerals, first used for Queen Victoria in 1901, was ready once more to carry the weight of a monarch. Dozens of members of the Sovereign Guard took their places to pull the carriage, a tradition born from necessity centuries ago, but one that had since become steeped in ceremony. As the Queen's coffin was carefully placed onto the carriage, the procession's leaders signaled the start of the journey to Westminster Abbey. The tolling of Big Ben continued, and the rhythmic sound of boots striking the pavement filled the air, providing a steady cadence to the unfolding pageantry. Spectators stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding back tears, others quietly mouthing prayers. This was a moment of collective grief and reflection. The Queen's coffin, with its vibrant royal standard and glittering crown, seemed to glow against the muted tones of the day. It was a striking juxtaposition. The brilliant symbols of her reign carried through a city mourning the end of an era. There was a sense of unity in the air, as though the shared act of remembrance bound everyone together. The procession wound its way through London streets, each step bringing the Queen closer to her final journey. Alongside the Sovereign Guard, members of the royal family walked in silence. Their measured pace mirrored the weight of their loss, their faces a picture of restrained emotion. Among them were King Charles III, the new monarch, and his siblings, Prince Andrew, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. Behind them followed Prince William, now the Prince of Wales, and Prince Harry, a poignant reminder of the unity and complexity within the royal family. As the carriage approached Westminster Abbey, the historic venue loomed large, its Gothic spires piercing the gray sky. The Abbey, which had witnessed the coronations and weddings of countless monarchs, now prepared to host a farewell befitting a queen. The crowd, sensing the magnitude of the moment, fell silent. It was as if the very air held its breath, waiting for the next chapter of the day to begin. The streets of London seemed to transform into a living mosaic of history and reverence as the Queen's coffin reached Westminster Abbey. The iconic spires of the Abbey, standing tall against the somber gray sky, seemed to carry the weight of centuries of royal traditions. It was a place that had witnessed coronations, weddings, and funerals of monarchs. But today, it would bear the profound responsibility of saying goodbye to a queen who had reigned longer than most had lived. Inside, the atmosphere was as solemn as it was grand. The Abbey, filled with dignitaries, world leaders, and members of the royal family, exuded a sense of unity that transcended borders. Rows of officials sat side by side, their faces a mixture of grief and respect. Among them were U.S. President Joe Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, and leaders from across the Commonwealth, all gathered to honor a figure whose influence had extended far beyond Britain. The Queen's coffin was carried into the Abbey with precision and care, the silence only broken by the sound of the organ playing a mournful hymn. As the pallbearers placed the coffin on its platform, the assembled congregation rose in unison, a silent gesture of collective respect. The grandeur of the moment was underscored by the Abbey's vast echoing halls, adorned with intricate stained glass and centuries-old stonework. The service began with the Archbishop of Canterbury, delivering a eulogy that captured the essence of the Queen's life and legacy. His words, measured and poignant, spoke not just of her role as a monarch, but as a symbol of resilience and continuity. He reminded those present, and the millions watching across the globe, of her steadfast dedication to her people and her ability to unify during times of division. His voice resonated with both reverence and humanity, offering comfort to those who mourned. Hymns filled the air, their melodies carrying a blend of sorrow and hope. One such hymn, "The Lord's My Shepherd," had a personal resonance, having been chosen by the Queen for her own wedding decades earlier. The music, paired with the solemn voices of the congregation, created an atmosphere that was both haunting and beautiful, a fitting tribute to a life so deeply intertwined with the nation's history. Amidst the solemnity, there were moments that captured the raw humanity of the occasion. As the camera panned across the royal family, it lingered briefly on Prince George and Princess Charlotte. The young heirs, just 9 and 7 years old, sat quietly beside their parents, their presence a poignant reminder of the monarchy's continuity. Their faces bore a mix of solemn understanding and youthful innocence, reflecting the weight of the moment even for those so young. Their inclusion in the service was unexpected, but deeply symbolic. Traditionally, children of their age would not have attended such a ceremony, but given the Queen's unprecedented 70-year reign, their presence spoke volumes about the future of the monarchy. It was a gesture that emphasized stability, a thread connecting generations past, present, and future. As the service progressed, the Queen's household cavalry prepared to perform one of the most iconic musical tributes, the Last Post. The haunting notes of the bugle echoed through the Abbey, a solemn farewell to the Queen's decades of service. The piece, with its military origins, carried a depth of emotion that transcended words. As the final note faded into silence, The congregation bowed their heads and a 2-minute nationwide silence began. The stillness was profound. Across the country, life seemed to pause. From bustling cities to quiet villages, people stopped what they were doing to honor a woman who had been a constant presence through changing times. The silence was not just an act of remembrance, but a collective acknowledgement of her impact. In those 2 minutes, the weight of loss and gratitude hung heavily in the air. When the silence ended, the service resumed with a renewed sense of gravity. The congregation rose once more to sing, "God Save the King." The anthem, sung for the first time in 7 decades with the masculine title, marked a historic transition. The words, so familiar yet suddenly different, seemed to carry the weight of the moment. As the congregation's voices swelled, the camera captured King Charles III, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. His grief, though controlled, was palpable, a reflection of both personal loss and the enormity of his new role. As the anthem concluded, the pallbearers prepared to carry the Queen's coffin from the Abbey. The atmosphere was heavy with the knowledge that this was the final farewell within these historic walls. The journey to Windsor Castle awaited, but for now, the Abbey stood as a silent witness to one of the most significant moments in modern history. The streets outside remained filled with mourners, their patience unwavering despite the long hours. They watched in hushed reverence as the coffin emerged once more, the vibrant royal standard standing out against the muted tones of the day. The procession resumed with the same meticulous choreography, the sovereign guard pulling the gun carriage while the royal family followed on foot. As the procession moved through London, the city itself seemed to mourn. The muffled sound of the carriage wheels against the cobblestones, the steady tolling of Big Ben, and the faint rustle of flags in the breeze created an almost otherworldly soundscape. It was as if the city had become part of the ceremony, its every corner infused with a quiet respect for the moment. People along the route held on to the significance of what they were witnessing. Many raised their phones to capture the moment, while others clutched photographs of the Queen, their faces etched with emotion. The crowd's silence was occasionally broken by soft murmurs or the sound of stifled sobs, reminders of the deep personal connection so many felt with the monarch. As the carriage passed Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere grew even more poignant. The iconic residence, so closely associated with the Queen's reign, stood as a stoic backdrop to the procession. Staff members, some of whom had served the Queen for decades, lined the front steps, their eyes glistening with tears. It was a reminder that the Queen's legacy extended beyond her public role. She had also touched the lives of those who knew her personally. The journey to Windsor Castle, though lengthy, felt like an extension of the funeral itself, a final opportunity for the public to say goodbye. For many, this would be their last chance to witness a piece of history, and they held on to the moment with a reverence that was both collective and deeply personal. As the procession made its way out of London and toward Windsor Castle, the weight of the day began to settle deeply across the nation. For hours, people had stood silently along the 20-mile route, their presence a testament to the profound respect and admiration they felt for the Queen. The specially designed hearse carrying her coffin was a sight to behold, its glass panels allowing onlookers to glimpse the draped royal standard and the intricate floral arrangement chosen by King Charles. It was a detail that felt both regal and personal, reminding everyone of the care and thoughtfulness woven into every aspect of the day. The hearse moved slowly, giving the crowds ample time to say their final goodbyes. Some saluted as it passed, their military precision reflecting a deep sense of duty. Others waved flags or simply bowed their heads, their gestures small but sincere. Along the route, silence was occasionally broken by spontaneous applause, a rare moment of collective expression that conveyed both gratitude and grief. The public's mourning was as varied as the people themselves, but in that moment, they were united in purpose. As the procession approached Windsor, the atmosphere grew even more poignant. The countryside surrounding the castle seemed to carry its own quiet dignity, the rolling green hills a stark contrast to the somber tones of the day. By the time the hearse arrived at the castle gates, the crowd had grown dense once more, their faces a mixture of sadness and awe. Windsor Castle, the Queen's beloved home and the site of many personal and official milestones, now stood ready to receive her one final time. Inside the grounds, the committal service at St. George's Chapel was about to begin. The chapel, steeped in history and architectural beauty, was an intimate setting compared to the grandeur of Westminster Abbey. Its smaller scale did not diminish its significance, however. For the royal family and the invited guests, this was a moment of profound personal reflection, free from the public gaze. The service began with a sense of quiet reverence. As the Queen's coffin was carried into the chapel, the choir's voices rose in harmony, filling the space with a sense of peace. The Dean of Windsor opened the ceremony with words of gratitude for the Queen's unstinting service and her steadfast presence during times of national and global uncertainty. His tone, both solemn and hopeful, reflected the duality of the moment, a farewell to a cherished monarch and a celebration of her extraordinary life. One of the most moving elements of the committal service was the symbolic removal of the sovereign objects. The orb, scepter, and imperial state crown, which had rested atop the Queen's coffin throughout her journey, were carefully taken by the royal jeweler and placed on the high altar. The act signified the end of her reign and the passing of responsibility to the new monarch. It was a deeply symbolic gesture, one that underscored the continuity of the British monarchy, even in the face of profound loss. King Charles played a pivotal role in this moment, laying the Queen's Company camp color of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. This act, steeped in military tradition, marked the transition of allegiance from the Queen to the King. The Grenadier Guards, a regiment with a history intricately linked to the monarchy, would now serve under his command. For those witnessing the ceremony, it was a poignant reminder of the enduring relationship between the Crown and the armed forces. The Lord Chamberlain, the highest-ranking officer of the royal household, then performed one of the day's most symbolic acts. He broke his wand of office, a staff that had represented his authority under the Queen, and placed the pieces atop the coffin. The breaking of the wand was a powerful gesture symbolizing the end of his service to the Queen as sovereign. Though his duties within the royal household would continue, his role in her reign had officially come to a close. The final moments of the committal service were steeped in tradition and emotion. The Queen's titles, which had been proclaimed countless times during her lifetime, were read aloud for the last time. Each word carried the weight of her legacy, a reminder of the responsibilities she had borne with grace and dignity. As the titles concluded, the coffin was lowered into the royal vault, a moment that signaled the end of her public journey. It was then that the Queen's piper performed his final duty, playing a lament as her coffin descended. The notes of "A Salute to the Royal Fendersmith" filled the chapel, their mournful tone echoing through the stone walls. As the piper walked slowly away, the music faded, creating a hauntingly beautiful conclusion to the service. It was a deeply personal touch, one that reflected the Queen's love of tradition and her connection to those who had served her faithfully. Outside the chapel, the Queen's beloved corgis Muke and Sandy waited quietly in the courtyard. The sight of the two dogs, gifts from her son Prince Andrew, was a poignant reminder of her personal life. Over her lifetime, the Queen had owned more than 30 corgis, and her affection for the breed was well known. Alongside the corgis stood her favorite fell pony, Emma, a companion she had ridden well into her 90s. These small but significant details added an intimate layer to the day, reminding everyone that behind the crown was a woman who had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. As the committee service ended and the day began to wind down, there was a sense of quiet finality. The public portion of the Queen's farewell had concluded, but one more ceremony remained. A private burial, attended only by close family, was scheduled for later that evening. It would be a moment free from the cameras and the crowds, allowing her family to say their final goodbyes in peace. The Queen's coffin, now housed in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, would rest beside her beloved husband, Prince Philip. For a monarch whose reign had spanned eras and whose legacy would endure for generations, this final resting place felt fitting, a quiet corner of Windsor, surrounded by the history she had shaped and the family she had cherished. As the evening light softened over Windsor, the air carried a palpable stillness. For many, the day's events had already etched themselves into history. But for those inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, A quieter, more intimate chapter of the Queen's farewell was about to unfold. While the world had borne witness to the grandeur and ceremonial significance of the funeral, what remained was deeply personal, a moment for those who had known and loved her to pay their private respects. The Queen's final journey to the King George VI Memorial Chapel began with the utmost care. Her coffin, now draped in the royal standard and adorned with a simple yet elegant wreath of flowers, was carried by pallbearers who had become a symbol of strength and precision throughout the day. Each step they took toward the chapel was deliberate, the weight they bore not just physical, but symbolic, a reflection of the nation's collective grief. Inside the chapel, the atmosphere was markedly different from the day's earlier ceremonies. Gone were the rows of dignitaries and the formalities of state. In their place stood a gathering of close family members, their presence a reminder that at its core, this was a farewell rooted in love and loss. The space, though smaller and more intimate than Westminster Abbey, seemed to magnify the emotions of the moment. Its simplicity offered solace, a quiet reprieve from the grandeur that had defined the day. As the service began, there was a noticeable shift in tone. This was not a public performance, but a deeply personal goodbye. The Archbishop of Canterbury, present once more, spoke with a gentler voice, addressing not the world but the family. His words were filled with gratitude for the Queen's life, emphasizing her role not only as a monarch but as a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. The sentiments were echoed in the faces of those gathered, their grief softened by memories of her warmth and kindness. The service included a few carefully chosen readings, each reflecting the Queen's faith and her commitment to service. Among them was a passage from the Book of Ecclesiastes, its timeless words offering comfort. "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven." It was a poignant reminder of the cyclical nature of life, a fitting reflection for a monarch who had witnessed so much change, yet remained a steadfast constant. Perhaps the most touching moment of the private ceremony came when the Queen's children each stepped forward to place personal tokens beside her coffin. These small gestures, though private, spoke volumes about their bond with her. Prince Charles, now King Charles III, placed a note written in his own hand, its contents shielded from the public but undoubtedly heartfelt. Princess Anne, known for her close relationship with her mother, laid down a simple sprig of rosemary, symbolizing remembrance. Each offering carried its own quiet weight, a blend of duty and love. As the service neared its conclusion, the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault. The mechanism, silent and smooth, carried her out of sight, a moment that drew tears from even the most stoic. The sound of the coffin descending seemed to echo through the chapel, a stark reminder of the finality of the moment. The family stood motionless, their silence heavy with unspoken words. In the courtyard outside, the Queen's beloved corgis waited faithfully, their quiet demeanor a stark contrast to the vibrant life they had shared with her. Muick and Sandy, gifts from Prince Andrew, stood side by side, their presence a poignant reminder of her love for animals. Nearby, her fell pony Emma grazed calmly, seemingly unaware of the significance of the day, but embodying the quiet grace that had defined the Queen herself. As the family exited the chapel, their faces bore the weight of the day's events. Some held each other for support, their gestures a testament to the strength they found in one another. For King Charles, the moment was particularly profound. His reign had officially begun, but this was his first step forward without the guiding presence of his mother. The enormity of his role seemed etched into his expression, a mixture of grief and resolve. The final moments of the day were marked by a release of emotion. For the public, the Queen's burial signaled the end of an era, a farewell to a monarch who had been a constant in an ever-changing world. For her family, it was a deeply personal goodbye to someone who had been at the center of their lives. The contrast between these two perspectives added layers to the day's meaning, weaving together the public and private dimensions of her legacy. As darkness fell over Windsor, the castle's lights illuminated the chapel, casting a gentle glow over the grounds. Outside, the crowds had thinned, but the floral tributes left behind spoke volumes. Bouquets, letters, and even small tokens like hand-drawn portraits of the Queen filled the area, a collective outpouring of love and respect. For those who had gathered, the day was one they would never forget. It was not just a farewell to a monarch, but a moment to reflect on the values she had embodied: service, resilience, and a quiet strength that had carried her through decades of change. The Queen's legacy, though tied to the crown, extended far beyond it. She had been a symbol of unity, a beacon of stability in turbulent times, and a figure who had touched the lives of millions. As the family retreated into the privacy of the castle, the world seemed to exhale. The day had been long and heavy, filled with moments that would be recounted for generations. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was also a sense of gratitude for a life well lived, and a reign that had left an indelible mark on history. In the quiet of the evening, Windsor Castle stood as a testament to the continuity of the monarchy and the enduring strength of tradition. The Queen had taken her place alongside the generations that had come before her, and while her reign had ended, her legacy would endure. It was a poignant close to a day that had been as much about looking forward to saying goodbye. As the castle grounds grew quieter, the world's attention turned inward to the Queen's final resting place. The day's public ceremonies had concluded, but within the King George VI Memorial Chapel, a private gathering of the Queen's closest family was underway. This intimate service, devoid of cameras and prying eyes, allowed the family to share their grief and gratitude away from the public gaze. The Queen's burial was the culmination of a journey not just for her, but for the entire royal family. For nearly 70 years, she had been the cornerstone of their lives, a figure of guidance and stability. Now, as they gathered to lay her to rest beside Prince Philip, the emotions of the day weighed heavily on their shoulders. The small chapel, already steeped in personal significance, became a sanctuary for their shared memories and private reflections. The service was brief, but deeply meaningful. King Charles, standing at the head of his family, offered a few words in remembrance of his mother. His voice, steady but filled with emotion, echoed softly within the chapel's stone walls. He spoke of her unwavering commitment to duty, her love for her family, and her ability to find joy in even the smallest moments. His words were not rehearsed or grandiose, they were the heartfelt reflections of a son saying goodbye to his mother. Each member of the family had their moment of quiet connection with the Queen's legacy. Prince William, the new Prince of Wales, knelt briefly by the coffin, his hand resting on the polished wood as he whispered his farewell. Beside him, Catherine held back tears, her composure steady as she comforted her children, George and Charlotte. The young heirs, who had shown remarkable poise throughout the day, now allowed their emotions to surface. Charlotte clutched a small handkerchief, her tears flowing freely as George placed a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of sibling support. Prince Harry, standing slightly apart, bowed his head in silence. His relationship with the Queen had been uniquely personal, one that had endured despite the challenges of recent years. For Harry, this moment was not about titles or roles. It was about honoring the grandmother who had always shown him unconditional love. The chapel's stillness was broken only by the faint rustle of flowers and the occasional soft murmur. The wreath atop the Queen's coffin, carefully selected by King Charles, included flowers with special significance: rosemary for remembrance, myrtle from her wedding bouquet, and English oak for strength. Each bloom told a story, a quiet tribute to the life she had lived and the values she had upheld. As the service drew to a close, the family formed a circle around the coffin for a final prayer. Their hands clasped together, they bowed their heads in unison, their collective presence a symbol of the unity the Queen had always sought to maintain within the family. The moment was as much about healing as it was about mourning, a recognition that her legacy would now rest in their hands. When the prayer ended, the coffin was gently lowered into the crypt. The sound of the mechanism, though subtle, seemed to echo with finality. For a moment there was silence, each family member lost in their thoughts. The Queen's journey had ended, but the weight of her absence was only beginning to settle. As the family left the chapel, their steps were unhurried, their faces reflective. They were not just leaving behind a monarch, they were saying goodbye to the woman who had been a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. The bond they shared with her was deeply personal, one that no crown or title could fully encapsulate. Outside, the evening air was cool, and the grounds of Windsor Castle were bathed in a soft, golden glow. The public, though absent from the private service, continued to pay their respects through countless tributes left at the castle gates. Bouquets of flowers, handwritten notes, and even small drawings from children lined the area, a testament to the deep affection felt by people of all ages and backgrounds. For many, the Queen had been more than a figurehead. She had been a symbol of continuity and resilience in an ever-changing world. Her reign had spanned eras, witnessing wars, technological revolutions, and cultural shifts. Yet she had remained steadfast, a constant presence in the lives of her people. Now, as the world faced the reality of her absence, there was a collective sense of gratitude for the stability she had provided. The day had been long and filled with moments that would be etched into history, but its significance extended beyond the ceremonies. It was a reminder of the values the Queen had embodied: service, humility, and unwavering dedication. Those who had watched, whether in person or from afar, carried with them a renewed sense of what it meant to serve with grace and dignity. As the castle's lights dimmed and the night deepened, the Queen's legacy began its next chapter. Her final resting place alongside Prince Philip and her parents was a quiet corner of Windsor that symbolized the deep roots of her family and her reign. The chapel would soon be open to the public, allowing visitors from around the world to pay their respects. Yet for now, it remained a sacred space, holding the memories of a day unlike any other. For King Charles, the road ahead was both daunting and filled with promise. He had inherited not only the crown but the responsibility of continuing the legacy his mother had left behind. The challenges he faced would be immense, but so too would be the strength he could draw from her example. Her life, marked by unwavering service and quiet strength, would remain a guiding light for him and for the nation. As Windsor Castle settled into stillness, the world reflected on the end of an era. The Queen's journey had been one of remarkable dedication and grace, and her farewell was a fitting tribute to a life well lived. Though the day had come to an end, her influence would endure, woven into the fabric of history and the hearts of those who had known her reign. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.